My name is Isabella Cole, and I have lived long enough to know that life has a strange way of revealing truths at the exact moment they need to be seen. For years, I kept my success tucked quietly behind me like a folded coat on a chair. I never bragged, never corrected anyone, and certainly never chased approval. I built my life with my own two hands, piece by piece, dollar by dollar. And yet, even after all that work, even after all the long nights and impossible choices, my own brother never once asked who I had become. Maybe he did not care. Maybe he assumed he already knew. But he was wrong. And the day he learned the truth began in the place I love most, my house on Willow Street. The house is a modest white brick home in a quiet suburb just outside Boston, America, a place where the streets are lined with maple trees and every neighbor knows the sound of every dog. When I bought it, I felt something I had not felt in years: stability. I had saved for that house for almost a decade, ever since my company crossed its first $5 million in annual profit. The moment the real estate agent handed me the keys, I felt as though the door to my old life had finally closed, leaving the noise and judgment behind. The house is peaceful in a way my childhood never was. It has blue shutters that I painted myself one summer afternoon, and a neat little garden filled with lilies and lavender, which I planted with my daughter Lena when she was 10. A tall maple tree stands guard near the front steps, dropping red and orange leaves all over the path each fall. Neighbors complain about the mess, but I love it. It makes the seasons feel alive. Inside, the house is simple and warm. Light pours in through the front windows in the morning, turning the living room into a soft golden space. The sofa is gray, the coffee table an old oak piece I bought from a secondhand market in town. The shelves are filled with books I've collected across my life: business strategy, European history, American literature, and a few novels I read so many times the pages have begun to curl. Lena often sits in the corner by the window, legs tucked beneath her, reading quietly. To me, that sight always felt like success, seeing her peaceful, safe, and unbothered by the noise of the world. Every item in that house reminds me of how far I have come from the days when I sat at our childhood kitchen table counting pennies while my brother Michael rolled his eyes at me. Michael never understood my seriousness. He was the golden boy, handsome, charming, the center of every party. People loved him instantly, and he knew it. I loved him too, but my love was the quiet type, the kind that watches from the doorway while the other one shines like a lamp in the center of a room. Growing up, he used to say, "Izzy, you think too hard. Life is meant to be enjoyed." I wanted to enjoy it too, but I also wanted stability, independence, and strength, things no one ever handed to girls in our family. So while Michael drifted toward fun, I drifted toward ambition. I made plans, wrote lists, and dreamed of places far beyond the little town we grew up in. When I was 18, I moved to New York City to study business. I still remember Michael standing on the porch, arms crossed, laughing gently as he said, "You'll come back in a year, Izzy. America loves dreamers, but it doesn't feed them."
He was wrong about that too. New York did not feed me, not at first.
I fed myself. I worked in a tiny office during the day, typed documents for lawyers in the evening, and waited tables in a diner at night. I fell asleep over textbooks, woke up before sunrise, and kept moving forward. It was not glamorous. It was not easy. But every time I earned another $50, every time I paid another bill on time, every time I learned something new about business strategy or marketing, I felt myself becoming someone stronger. Over the years, I learned how companies operate, how money flows, how markets shift, how people in both America and Europe invest, build, and grow. I saved carefully, even when I had almost nothing to save. My bank account climbed from $200 to $2,000, then to $20,000, and then to numbers I had never imagined before. By 35, I had founded Crescent Lane Media, a digital marketing company that helped American brands reach into Europe and European brands expand into America. It was a simple idea at first, but I pushed it hard. I studied international trends, built a small team, then a larger team, then an entire network. When one of our early campaigns went viral, everything changed overnight. Suddenly, I was seeing invoices worth £50,000, $80,000, $120,000. I paid my staff well, invested wisely, and kept growing. Crescent Lane Media became my second child, one that demanded time, intelligence, and endless patience. But I never told my family the truth. Not because I was hiding it, but because no one ever asked. To them, I was still just Izzy who works with computers somewhere in the city. Michael never pressed further. He was too busy living his life, drifting from job to job, woman to woman, city to city. He assumed success would always come to him naturally, just as attention always had. He never imagined that quiet, serious Isabella would be the one to build something lasting. But the most important part of my life was not my company. It was Lena, my daughter, my heart. I raised her alone from the moment she was born. People whispered about me when I showed up at my mother's porch with a baby in my arms and no husband beside me. Michael whispered the loudest. He joked, judged, and treated my daughter like a reminder of my mistake. I ignored him. I poured my energy into giving Lena a life filled with security, dignity, and love, things I never had as a child. On the morning that changed everything, I watched Lena step out of the house wearing a pale cream dress. It wasn't her wedding, it was my brother's. But when she turned around in that dress, with the sunlight behind her and the calmness of our Willow Street home wrapped around her, I felt a strange tightness in my chest. She looked so grown, so graceful, so ready for life. And I wondered, not for the first time, what my brother would say to her today. What joke he might make. What little cruelty he might offer, without thinking. I had no idea that before the day ended, he would say the worst thing he had ever said. And I had no idea that his entire world, and mine, was about to change. The wedding was set in a luxurious hotel ballroom in Philadelphia, America, the kind of place where the ceiling seems too high for a normal day and the chandeliers glitter as if they have their own private moon trapped inside them. When Lena and I walked through the glass doors, the shift in atmosphere was immediate. The lobby was bustling with guests dressed in satin and suits, all of them eager to be part of what they expected to be a beautiful celebration. A soft instrumental version of an old American love song played in the background, and for a moment, I allowed myself to breathe calmly. I had promised myself that no matter how difficult things became with Michael, today I would be polite. Just polite enough. The ballroom itself was decorated in shades of gold and ivory. Rows of chairs were wrapped in crisp white covers, and each chair had a small ribbon tied neatly at the back. Large vases full of pale pink roses lined the aisle, and petals were scattered across the carpet as if they had been placed by hand one by one. The air smelled of perfume, champagne, and something sweet, maybe vanilla from the towering wedding cake I saw in the corner near the stage. The room buzzed with excitement. People clinked glasses, laughed loudly, and called out Michael's name as if he were America's most beloved celebrity. But none of that mattered to me. I had eyes only for Lena. She stood beside me in a gentle lavender dress, her curly hair pinned softly at the back. At 22, she had grown into the kind of young woman who carried herself with quiet strength. Not the loud confidence that fills a room, but the warm, steady confidence that makes people feel safe. She touched the strap of her dress nervously, and I squeezed her hand. "You look beautiful," I told her because she did, and because she needed to hear it. She smiled at me, shy but grateful. "You do too, Mom." We made our way toward the cluster of relatives gathering near the center of the ballroom. Their voices rose into cheerful greetings the moment they spotted us. I answered politely, though my attention shifted constantly toward the entrance. I knew Michael would make a dramatic entrance. He always liked an audience. And as if summoned by the thought, he appeared. My brother walked in wearing a dark suit that probably cost more than he could truly afford. His tie was too bright, his hair too shiny with gel, and his smile too wide. The smile of a man who believes the day revolves around him. He rushed toward me, opening his arms. "Isabella," he said loudly, giving me a half-hug that felt more like a public performance than a family greeting. "You clean up well." I forced a polite smile. "You too." Then his eyes shifted to Lena. They lingered on her for a moment, longer than I liked. His expression changed slightly, narrowing the way it used to whenever he was about to say something unpleasant. "And the famous daughter," he said, his grin widening. "All grown up." Lena lowered her gaze, unsure how to respond, and I could feel her discomfort. My jaw tightened. I wished, not for the first time, that Michael could simply speak without trying to dig into an old wound. We hardly had time to move before a few relatives joined us, greeting Lena warmly, then immediately asking the question they always asked about her father. I felt Lena's hand slip from mine, her shoulders tightening. Before I could step in, I saw Michael's smirk forming, the same smirk he wore when we were younger, when my mistakes, real or imagined, became his favorite source of entertainment. His voice rose above the chatter, slicing through the room like a blade. "Well," he said loudly, looking directly at Lena and then at me, "this is your illegitimate child, isn't it, Izzy?" The room froze.
Completely.
The music continued playing, but it sounded distant, as if someone had stuffed cotton in my ears. A few guests gasped softly. Someone dropped a spoon onto a plate, and it rang like a tiny bell in the silence. Lena's eyes widened, filling with hurt, then dropped toward the floor as if she was trying to make herself smaller. I felt the blood rush to my face, hot and sharp. Time stretched painfully. Michael stood with his hands on his hips, a careless grin on his face, the kind of grin that told me he didn't think his words mattered. To him, it was just a joke. Just another moment where he could control the conversation, entertain the crowd, and remind me of who he thought I was and who he thought Lena was. But he was not ready for the truth that would come next. Before I could speak, before I could gather the scattered pieces of myself, a sudden sharp giggle broke the tension. The sound was bright, surprised, and utterly out of place. I turned my head slowly. It was Olivia Harrington, the bride. She stood a few steps behind Michael, dressed in a silk gown that shimmered under the chandelier lights. Her blonde hair was pinned perfectly, her makeup flawless, her smile careless. She had approached quietly, holding a glass of champagne, and she had heard the entire thing. For a second, she tried to hide her laughter behind her hand, thinking, perhaps, that this was some kind of family banter. A light joke. Something harmless. But it wasn't harmless. Her giggle sent a chill through me. Not because she meant to hurt me, but because she didn't understand it all. She didn't understand the years of struggle that lived behind my daughter's eyes. She didn't understand the silent battles I fought alone when people questioned my worth, my choices, my future. She didn't understand what it meant for my brother to say those words in front of my child. She didn't understand who I really was. I stared at her, and the laughter died on her lips the moment she saw my face. She swallowed, realizing too late that she had laughed in the wrong moment, laughed at the wrong girl, laughed at the wrong mother. Then Lena trembled beside me. I felt the tiny movement in her arm, the kind of trembling that comes from shame mixed with heartbreak. Something inside me, something quiet and buried, cracked open. A storm that had been building for years finally broke free inside my chest. It did not roar or explode. It rose slowly, steadily, like a wave rising from the deep. And I knew, right then, that the truth of who I had become would no longer stay hidden. Not today, not in this hall, not after what he said about my daughter. For a brief moment, the ballroom fell into a silence, so heavy I could almost hear my own heartbeat. Guests who had been laughing and sipping champagne seconds earlier now froze with their glasses halfway to their lips. No one knew what to say. No one knew how to breathe. The music played on, soft and unaware, as if it belonged to a different world altogether. Before I could respond to Michael's cruel comment or Olivia's misplaced laughter, I felt the crowd shift. A tall man pushed his way forward, cutting through the guests like someone walking through fog, quietly but with purpose. He wore a dark gray suit that fit him perfectly, the kind of suit chosen by a man who understood both style and responsibility. His hair was silver, neatly combed back, and his blue eyes were sharp as ice water, recognizable immediately. It was Blake Harrington, Olivia's father. I had met him only a handful of times, always in a professional setting, always in conference rooms or event halls, never in family circles. He was a respected businessman from Virginia, steady, cautious, and well-spoken. But the look on his face now was not cautious. It was stunned. He stared at Michael for a second, then at me, then at Lena, confusion twisting his features. Then, as if a realization clicked into place, he pointed at me. "You," his voice cracked slightly. You're Isabella Cole?" I lifted my chin.
Yes.
"I am." I watched his expression change from surprise to near panic. The man who negotiated contracts worth hundreds of thousands of dollars without blinking now looked like he had walked straight into a storm he did not know existed. He stepped closer. "The Isabella Cole who owns Crescent Lane Media?" His voice dropped, almost reverent. I nodded once. "The same one." Behind him, several guests gasped. I heard murmurs swirl like wind moving around walls. "She owns it? That company? The one in New York? That's her?" Even the servers carrying trays slowed down to stare. I saw Olivia's lips fall open in disbelief. She looked from her father to me as if trying to connect two separate worlds that had suddenly collided in front of her. Then she whispered, so faintly that only those of us nearby could hear. "I thought Miss Cole was just some woman I'd seen at the office. I didn't know she was Aunt Isabella." Her face drained of color. Michael, however, looked stunned for an entirely different reason. He blinked repeatedly, as though trying to force the picture in front of him to make sense. "You own the company?" he asked, his voice cracking. "The big one? The one with offices in New York, Boston, and London?" "Yes," I replied calmly. "For 10 years now." He looked as though someone had hit him in the chest. "You never said." I held his gaze. "You never asked." The truth sat between us like a heavy stone. For years, he mocked my life, my daughter, my choices. He never once asked how I was doing, never once cared to know what I had built. He simply assumed he understood my life better than I did. And now he stood there, finally seeing me clearly, and hating what it revealed about him. Blake swallowed hard, then turned to his daughter. "Olivia, did you know this?" She shook her head, unable to look at me.
"No, Dad."
I had no idea. Blake inhaled deeply, then faced me with a kind of humility I had rarely witnessed in men of his stature. He straightened his jacket and approached slowly, as if stepping toward someone he respected far more now than he did moments before. "Miss Cole, Isabella," he said gently, "please forgive my daughter. She didn't know who you are. She didn't understand. She would never have laughed if she knew." His voice trembled with sincerity. This was not the arrogance of a wealthy father trying to protect his daughter. This was a man realizing that he stood before someone who had earned her success through sheer force of will, someone he should have recognized, respected, and honored long before this moment. I remembered working with him years ago. He had been impressed when a single campaign I designed brought his family business over $200,000 in new sales. He shook my hand then with admiration. But he had no idea that the quiet woman managing his project was the sister of the man his daughter was marrying. Now he knew, and the knowledge scared him. But my focus was on Michael. He looked pale. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again like he couldn't find the right words. "Izzy," he whispered. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." I said nothing. "You built all that?" he asked, his voice small. "The offices, the clients, all the success?" "I did," I replied. He stared at the floor like a boy who finally understood the damage he caused. The crowd watched, silent and waiting. Blake cleared his throat. His voice was steady, but his eyes held worry. "Tell me what you want, Isabella. I will honor it, whatever it is. You deserve that right." I looked at Lena. Her eyes were glassy with unshed tears, yet she held her chin high, just like I taught her. Her hand slipped into mine. She squeezed once, firm, brave, supportive. At that moment, everything in me settled into a cold, perfect clarity. I turned back to Blake. "My condition," I said, my voice calm but sharp, "is that there will be no wedding here today." A stunned hush fell over the entire ballroom. For a long moment, Blake didn't move. He just stared at me, absorbing the weight of my words. Then slowly he nodded. A nod of a man who knew the consequences of inaction. A nod of a man who understood respect. "So be it," he said quietly. The room erupted into shocked whispers, but my heart was steady. For the first time in years, Michael understood that I was not the girl he used to mock. I was not the struggling sister he looked down on. I was a woman who had rebuilt her life in America with determination, strength, and dignity. Dignity he tried to crush with a single sentence. He didn't succeed, because he never knew who I really was. The words hung in the air like a sharp bell that refused to fade. No wedding. I saw the meaning strike every single person in that ballroom. It was as if the chandeliers dimmed for a heartbeat, as if even the flowers stopped breathing. People looked from Blake to me, then to Michael, as though waiting for someone to laugh and call it a misunderstanding. But no one did. Blake Harrington stood tall beside his daughter, and I stood tall beside mine. Blake nodded once, a slow, heavy motion of a man who had spent his entire life making business decisions worth millions of dollars and knew instantly when a situation demanded firmness. "So be it," he said. "The wedding is canceled." His voice carried across the hall, across the tables and decorations, through the pockets of stunned guests who had no idea what kind of family storm they had just walked into. He turned fully toward the crowd and lifted one hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "there will be no wedding today." Silence broke into small, frantic murmurs. A violinist stopped mid-bow, the soft note dying like a wounded thing. A young child began to cry somewhere near the back row. A group of women covered their mouths. A man started whispering to his wife, so quickly the words tangled together. I stood there watching it all, but I felt strangely still, like the world was moving around me while I remained untouched. After years of swallowing my pain quietly, I finally felt that deep breath of justice. Not revenge, not triumph, just a clean boundary finally being drawn. Olivia turned to Michael. Her face flushed with anger, embarrassment, and something like betrayal. Her silk gown rustled sharply as she stepped toward him. "You didn't tell me," she hissed, her voice low but furious. "You didn't tell me your sister is my boss. You didn't tell me she built her company from nothing. You didn't tell me she's one of the smartest businesswomen in America. And you didn't tell me," her voice rose, "that you would call her daughter, your own niece, an illegitimate child. In front of everyone." Her voice cracked at the last part, not from sadness, but from disgust. Michael lifted his hands helplessly. "Olivia, I didn't know. I just, she snapped, cutting him off. "You just insulted them. You just humiliated the woman who signs my paychecks. You just made yourself look like a fool in front of my entire family and every guest here. And you just showed me exactly who you are." Michael's face drained of color. Olivia took 2 steps back, lifted her dress, and walked past him without a second glance. Her father followed immediately, putting one protective hand on her shoulder as he guided her toward the exit. The guests parted like water. Some lowered their heads, unsure whether to look at me or Michael. Some stared at me with newfound respect, and others with confusion, perhaps wondering how the quiet sister had suddenly become the most powerful person in the room. I felt none of it. My heart was steady, almost calm. Michael turned toward me slowly. For the first time in maybe 20 years, he did not wear that arrogant, playful smirk. His mouth was unsteady, his eyes unfocused. "Izzy," he said softly, like a child who had lost something and didn't know how to explain it. "I'm sorry.
I didn't mean it like that."
"I was just joking. You know how I am." "Yes," I replied. "I know exactly how you are." He swallowed hard. "I didn't know about your company. I didn't know you were successful." "That doesn't matter," I said. "You didn't need to know the number of dollars in my bank account to respect me. You didn't need to know my job title to treat my daughter kindly." His eyes filled with guilt, real guilt. The kind that sinks deep when a person finally sees their own reflection clearly. "Please," he whispered. "Forgive me. We're family." Family, that word slid into my mind like a memory. I saw myself younger, standing on our mother's porch with a newborn baby in my arms, when Michael made his first cruel joke. I remembered the Thanksgiving dinners where he teased me about choosing the wrong men, as if single motherhood were something contagious. I remembered the whispers he encouraged, the comments he made behind my back, and sometimes directly to my face. I remembered Lena crying at age 9 because a boy at school said what he had said today, repeating a word he must have heard from someone careless and cruel. I looked at Michael directly, and for once, he did not look away. "I accept that you're sorry," I said quietly, choosing each word with care. "But I do not forgive you." His mouth fell open. "Izzy, you can't say that." "I can," I said. "And I am." He shook his head in disbelief. "But we're family. That has to count for something." "It counts for the pain," I replied, "not the forgiveness." My voice didn't shake. My hands didn't tremble. Years of quiet strength rose through me like a tide. "You spent years tearing me down," I said. "You insulted my daughter on what should have been a special day. And you only cared about making things right when you learned how much money I have. That is not love. That is not respect. That is not family." He stepped back as though he had been physically hit. I turned to Lena, who stood with tears in her eyes but fire in her heart. "Come on," I told her gently. "We're leaving." As we walked toward the doors, the crowd moved aside without a word. Some nodded, some lowered their eyes, some watched us with admiration they had never shown before. I didn't care either way. Respect wasn't my goal. Peace was. When we stepped outside, the bright afternoon sun of America warmed my face. For a moment, I closed my eyes. Lena slipped her arm through mine. "Mom," she whispered, "are you okay?" I looked at her, the one constant in my life, the one person I never had to hide from, the girl who became my reason for everything. "Yes," I said. "For the first time in a very long time, I am." We drove home to our white brick house on Willow Street. I made tea in the small kitchen where I once counted spare coins and later counted contract payments worth hundreds of thousands of dollars or pounds. The evening sunlight moved across the wooden table we had shared so many meals on, and I felt a quiet satisfaction settle over me. Upstairs in my home office, I could see folders marked New York, Chicago, Dallas, London, and Edinburgh, each one filled with contracts and project plans. My work stretched across America and into Europe, but none of it mattered more than the peace inside my home. Michael called later. Then he sent messages. Long, emotional messages filled with apologies. I read them. I didn't reply. Maybe one day I will forgive him. Maybe. Or maybe not. That choice rests with me, not with him. For now, I live the life I built. My house, my company, my daughter, my freedom. And when people ask about the ruined wedding in Philadelphia, I simply say, my brother didn't know who I had become. Now he does. And that is enough.